Hello, and welcome to Night Clerk Radio. This is episode 93. More soundtracks from movies that don't quite exist. And by that, I mean they don't exist at all. They're concept albums for fictional movies, which is a whole thing, it turns out. And so we found two of them, and we're going to talk about them. And I really like this idea because, you know, movie soundtracks, as we've mentioned before, are pretty heavy inspiration for a lot of the music we listen to. And so a lot of musicians like working in that space, right? And so they just took it a step further. What if, you know, I want to do a soundtrack, but I don't know any filmmakers, and, you know, why don't I just make up my own movie and then just have it not exist and just go wild with it? So, yeah.
Yours skates by on a technicality.
Oh, yeah, it's true. Yeah.
Just whatever the artist says goes here. Just fine.
I was doing searches on because there are enough of these albums out there that you can do.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Like there are lists of them and stuff like that. In fact, I do remember back in my thrash metal listening days, there's a band called Send More Paramedics, and it's zombie thrash metal. And
makes sense.
Like they released a double disc album. I forgot the name of it, but where the first half is like just standard, like their standard kind of thrash metal with zombie themed lyrics. But then the second one is a synth heavy, like instrumental soundtrack of a, fictional zombie movie. And yeah, a lot of artists like to stretch their legs and try this out. Yeah, I really had a lot of fun listening to these albums. But any thoughts on the fictional movie soundtrack, Burke?
Yeah, I had a few like half-baked thoughts about why they're so popular. I like your charitable reading of people just stretching their legs. It's not like an uncharitable thought of like can't really ever imagining making more stuff. So you just make old stuff, like fake old stuff instead of making new things. Right. Because they're never fake soundtracks to a movie that's yet to come out. Right. Like if there's counterexamples to that, somebody should let me know, because that'll be interesting too. Of like, this is a soundtrack from the future to the 2084 hit, blah, 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 blah. Okay. You know? Yeah. Like that's not realistic. It's always about stuff in the past. And I do think it's a little bit of like a convenient lens for nostalgia. We don't make Return of the Living Dead anymore. So here's me to do my Assault of the Living Dead soundtrack. Totally different, man. Or, you know, my album sounds like Poltergeist or Name of the Rose meets Prince of Darkness or something like that.
I would love to see that movie.
Yeah. Actually, yeah. Now that I say it out loud, I get it. I get the appeal. Yeah. I just always I'm always torn on this stuff because I always like them. And I love like the idea of like fake lost media, but also it does feel a bit of like falling into foreverism of just like getting trapped in these nostalgia repetition cycles of just like, I'm going to reinvent like things from the past I wish existed instead of making new things in the future. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, I can see that. But you can argue that, you know, it is in some sense because they are making it, but yeah. It's like, I like this type of music. I wish there was more of it from my past. And so I'm just going to make more in this exact same style. Yeah. You know, hadn't even thought that a lot of these albums are stylized on, there was this movie and it was lost, but we found the soundtrack. Like they really have this like story behind it to try and like really hook listeners and potential, you know, album buyers. Right. You know, I'm also thinking about like, I wonder if anyone has made like one of these albums and then like it got put on a real movie soundtrack. Just fuck with them. Yeah. No. Yeah. Well, like, you know, like some filmmakers, especially low budget, probably like, you know, they always do scratch tracks when editing a movie, right? They just use existing music to kind of give it a rough cut. And sometimes they may fall in love with the music and just like use that, right? Try and get the rights for it. So that would be interesting if, you know, the reverse happened. The soundtrack came out first and then a movie was made around it. Now I'm thinking about two artists that I used to listen to a lot. Two Steps from Hell and E.S. Posthumous. Okay. Have you heard of these artists? I have not. Well, you've heard their music because basically they would do, their whole thing was making cinematic sounding music just as full albums. And the thing is, it was so well made that like Hollywood discovered it. And so like it was used as trailer music for a billion fucking things. And it was used in actual movies a lot of times. It was just used over and over and over again. And so, yeah, the cinematic soundtrack has become its own sort of like subgenre in itself. Like these were not like junk. These were like
orchestral Hollywood score type music, you know, big crescendos and, you know, dramatic, sad string sections and that kind of thing. You know, it's an interesting, you know, we have silent films, they get accompanied by music, and then we get talkies. And then like there's this back and forth, right, between movies and music and how they evolve over time.
Well, now I'm going off your like a cynical way to get a movie made is to make a viral soundtrack to it before the movie exists.
Yeah.
And then use that to leverage financing to make your actual movie.
You know, I wouldn't be surprised if that has actually happened. Some fucking Italian synthwave composer like got some funding to make a low budget like horror sci-fi movie. There's so many you can't keep track of them all, even if you're a fan. So
sure,
if you're listening to this episode and you know of an example, please let us know in the comments. These albums in general are just fun to listen to, not like continuously, but it's a nice little like break from listening to other things.
Yeah, and that's always my concern with like the nostalgia media is that for me, like it's a nice little break. It's a fun little thing to like think about, like a thought experiment. But then you read comments and people are like, I hate all crap come out now. I wish they make real movie like this still.
Oh yeah.
Like no, man. Like
yeah, it's become kind of a signifier, right? That you're the right type of fan.
Yeah.
That you're, you know, I love the dark synth music of the 80s and like all current movie music is crap and shit like that. But like, you know, I just watched this video about talking about like from a cinematographer who's like, yeah, people talk about like, oh, I only love practical effects in movies. And like, I hate CGI effects. And, you know, Hollywood has figured this out. So they're selling you no CGI movies, but those movies are full of CGI. They've just learned how to do it invisibly. So you don't know. So it's like.
And that's been true since like the 90s of even just like, or like just the degree to how much every frame is just absolutely fucked with. That's frame fucking is the term. And yeah, they basically just sit down and just fucking paint everything digitally be exactly what they want anyway.
Yeah.
Like you just have an army of essentially slaves do it. Like, you know, we were talking about in the Patreon Discord, this is a little off topic, but this mirror scene in Moon Knight, I think, where they like bragged about we took a year to digitally edit cameramen out of all the mirrors. And it's like, bro, we just did that practically.
Yeah,
like 50 years ago for a fraction of the cost. So this be like money laundering. And I also think it's just on-set laziness. Like, oh, I'm a big director and a star. Why would I take the time to do something right when I can pay some dude 30 cents to fix it?
Well, it's also like in that case too, also the entire Marvel output is like a factory, right? Like they have a standardized way of doing everything.
That's true too. Yeah.
And so like nothing, you can't be innovative or like take time aside to get one-way mirrors or do anything like that. You have to you shoot the Marvel way, they edit the Marvel way, and they do post-production the Marvel way. Like it's all the same. Yeah. And so you can't be creative in that sense because you're not even directing, you're just being an employee under the main MCU creative team, which are a bunch of, you know, executives and Kevin Feige and blah, 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 blah. Yeah. So, yeah. But yeah, now we're thoroughly off topic.
But but you can be creative when making soundtracks to movies that don't exist.
It's true.
Which we're going to talk about now.
Perfect segue.
That was a bit from track 2, The Satan Complex, parenthesis, opening credit, of The Satan Complex by Gavino Moretti, which is a unsung hero, according to them, of the 80s Italian cinema soundtrack scene. So it's sort of fun because it is released on Disco Nero Records, and the Gavino Moretti name has released 4 albums that are all fake movie soundtracks. So there's Assault of the Living Dead, because you gotta have your zombies. There's Alien Terrors, which is like a sci-fi invasion film, I believe. There's this, which is the Satan Complex, which I said is In the Name of the Rose meets the Prince of Darkness, which I'll elaborate on in a second. And then Girl Zero, which is actually like an amazing premise because all the premises are written out like in the album notes, synopses, and it's like robot gladiators and one robot gladiator girl escapes and into like a post-apocalyptic wasteland of the far off 2013.
Nice.
It's just all these sort of like genre prestige films and their soundtracks. I think Satan Complex is probably the best because it's, to me, the least just tried to be synthwave, I guess. It's also like closer to a genre that I enjoy and know a lot about, music that I enjoy and know a lot about. Yeah, so this is supposed to be a soundtrack to the 1984 occult hit, The Satan Complex, which is about a monastery that Satan takes over and a team of parapsychologists come in, and it's very 80s of like, can science and faith reconcile to solve problems? Sort of the idea, which was, again, you know, I jokingly said like Poltergeist, we bring in the team of investigators for the haunting. And
oh yeah, so well established. Yeah,
now is a whole thing, of course, you know, ever since Ghost Adventures and all that stuff. But
or Legend of Hill House or Hell House, you know, like from the
well, I was thinking more of like the transition to reality TV.
Oh yeah,
like Zach Baggins and stuff, and like ghost of this house.
It's interesting you
spit on my petri dish.
You mentioned that because I went to this talk by the horror writer Grady Hendrix, who just wrote a novel, How to Sell a Haunted House, and he makes a point of how like you can correlate the popularity of the haunted house genre with like real estate precarity. So like that reality TV spike in ghost hunting and that kind of shit can be tied to like about when it took off. Like he points like, oh, the economy and the housing prices really took a shit when those shows got popular. So
I was thinking the other way of like, you know, as someone casually looking for a house, I would maybe get a haunted one if it was well below market value.
I mean, yeah, that's the thing is he like, and that he actually brings that up too. Like back in the 19th century, Americans would go over to the UK and they would want haunted houses to lease to live in. They would pay more for a good haunted house because ghost stories were so popular in the 19th century that like they wanted a night. And you know, American houses were all so new compared to the British ones. Yeah, yeah.
So as an actual soundtrack, though, I mean, I like this album. I think it was fun. I think it's a lot of good. I don't want to quite say callbacks because it doesn't like directly reference anything, but it has a lot of the characteristics you'd expect. So like that theme I played in that opening sample, we've got that heartbeat bass I always talk about, like a lot of like Carpenter and stuff there. There's like a real minimalist little staccato piano melody. Like just stick to 3 notes, man.
Yeah.
Hit me with that minor second and we're set. But there's like lots of layers and texture underneath. There's like wind and some tracks have, you know, like electricity and buzzing and like, you know, there's little pulsing synths. So still a lot of like production, right? Which is sort of a weird aspect of these in some sense, where they still have like a lot of modern sensibilities to them. When you do listen to like those old Carpenter soundtracks that were just like, oh, we have like 4 tracks, right? Yeah. And like,
yeah, minimalist. Yeah,
it's not quite as minimalist and it's very clean. So I like to imagine it as like some like TerraVision style restoration rather than like the air quotes true soundtrack or whatever.
Oh yeah,
because it is like so clean and modern in some ways.
Yeah, I quite like this. This is the kind of like dark synth that I really like. Like a lot of artists in the dark synth space are really influenced by people like Perturbator, which want to make that really fast paced Hotline Miami like murder kill spree like almost EDM kind of soundtrack, and those are fine, but I like the, you know, for just listening, I kind of like more the moodier, more atmospheric, slower paced stuff. And I also really like, this is also the kind of synth that like, you know, the 80s synth has a very distinct sound, right? But like it's John Carpenter would counterpoint it with like real instrumentation too, like a guitar coming in or piano. And I think that balance between the 80s synth and the real instrument, or synths that sound like real instruments, you know, like you can't really tell, is a really nice sound. And like the Perturbator, like, you know, Hotline Miami thing is pure synth. Like that is, there's nothing real in that. And it's all maybe electric guitar, but that would be about it. And like, this is not that. And I quite like the formula of real instrument and like 80s sounding synths. And like, it's when done well and knowing when not to keep adding on more shit is really important skill for a composer. Yeah,
because there are like little bits of like acoustic and whatnot. Through here, there's one track 9, Lectio Divina. So that was interesting because it's like 2 minutes, which is on the shorter side for this album, but it's not full of long tracks. There's just like lo-fi piano piece. It doesn't have like anything else, like a little bit of like texture or background underneath. So it's not just piano. And so I wonder if that was supposed to be like diegetic or something, like throwing that in for fun, like it's from the movie, because it's kind of minimal and somber and it's really not as crisp as the other tracks. That kind of stood out to me.
Yeah. There are some of the later tracks that actually reminded me of Dungeon Synth, like tracks 13 and 15 in particular. Like they're slower. They're more, I don't want to say optimistic, but they're like the title is like Sword of the Spirit and the Holy Light. So like these are like the good guys are rallying for the final fight. They found some magic thing, some holy thing to give them a chance. So kind of like I've been listening to a lot of Dungeon Synth over the last couple of months and just kind of like just late night, relaxing, wind down kind of music. And people think of Dungeon Synth as like scary monster fighty, but like a lot of it's very contemplative, and like these tracks remind me of that. Like it's like the points of light in a horror movie. It's important in any kind of horror thing to have moments of respite, moments of calm, because otherwise, if you're just hammering people the entire time, they're going to get numb to it.
Yeah, I think from that same block, I really liked track 14, which is Soul and Body Burns, which is just like grimy and kind of spooky. But I think in general, those types of tracks were my favorite. The ones that were a little more ambient, a little more mellow, a little more in the background. So one example of that, and I'll play a sample from it here, is track 8, Death and Desolation. So this is just, I think, the kind of track, like I was saying, that I like the most off this album, which is just a lot of layers, a lot of synth, pretty mellow, a little down tempo, and doesn't really have as many distracting elements. Because one issue I had with a few of these tracks, and not like a huge criticism, but I thought a few of them had really nice drone underneath, like really nice, like an ambient bass, like a bedrock to build on. But then the synth on top of it was like higher pitched and like piercing and dissonant. And like sometimes that worked fairly well because they would have like all these weird effects on it. Like I think in track 4, Father Jacob's Nightmare, like the synth is like run through all these envelope effects and reversed and everything. So it's all like, it all feels a little weird. It didn't work as much for me in, I'm trying to think of like an example because I don't want to sound like, they're not like bad tracks. Like track 6, Blood Spilled, I feel like has some synth over it that hit a little weird with me. And I think track 10, The Pit, was where it really sort of ended up in my notes of like, I don't always like this. I don't know. That was some of my stuff I wish was like a little bit different. I think it's because I like what's underneath of it so much. But yeah. I get that you have to do this kind of like little like dissonant delay stuff because it's unsettling and it's horror movie and it's of the time. It's appropriate for what they're trying to make. So I get it. But I think, the other more minimal tracks are what I liked. So for an example of like the high pitched synth working for me is like track 15, A Holy Light, which is like this weird muddy choral. It's like, it's like choral, but it's not like very crisp in the same way. It's a little muddled, but like there's a little bit of higher pitched synth coming in that over the end, but it just works better. It's not as distracting. Yeah.
So yeah, Satan Complex is a really nice, again, if you want that, if you like John Carpenter and you like that style of soundtrack, this is a perfect album for you. But like, yeah, you're not going to get anything substantially new. This is an homage to this era of music, not just movies. And like I said, I like that it's slower paced. Like too much of Dark Synth is too fast and furious. And like a couple of those tracks go a long way. Like I listened to a Hotline Miami mix and after like 20 minutes, I'm done. Like I can't listen to like a full album of that Perturbator style intensity. And this is something I could listen to, any night, I'm writing something spooky or whatever. This is perfect. This is definitely going to go into my mixes.
Yeah, I loved it. Also, a lot of great ambient, a lot of cool little like loops here and there. Really good at being ominous. Really appropriate. I do want to, in more detail, listen to the other 3 albums, even though I think they're a little more synthwave focused than what interests me. But overall, I think it's a fun album, and I think it's something that you could like as a joke work the opening credits or the reprise, which is the last track, is like a reprise of the credits, like bringing back some of those themes into like a Halloween playlist. And if people ask, just be like, bro, it's from the Satan Complex. Have you ever seen it?
Yeah. Look, here's the album art. Like, yeah, it was a very real movie. Yeah.
You should look into it.
Is John Carpenter on Cameo? Can we get him in on the joke? Yeah. That'd be great. That was a sample from Soundtracks for the Blind by Swans. That was track 4, Live Through Me. Soundtrack for the Blind, a concept album for a fictional movie soundtrack, but they don't really commit to it. This is very epic post-rock music, almost 2.5 hours of basically you get like 3 albums in one. Like there's a lot going on in this album. And this is my first exposure to Swans, which I was obviously a glaring hole in my knowledge of music, because they are obviously a massive group of post-rock, experimental rock, noise rock, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
And yeah, this album's from 1996, but it's been re-released several times. I was listening to the version that's available on Bandcamp, and I loved it. The sample I just played is not representative of the entire album, because there's
no way to be represented.
Yeah, exactly. It's a lot. So Burke, I think you're more familiar with Swans than I am. Like, what's sort of your background and knowledge of them?
Yeah, a little bit. So, I mean, I had not heard of this album. I was not really aware of Swans until their like 2010 revival, because this album is sort of the end of their first run, which was like they've been to the early 80s, I guess early 80s to late 90s. And they came out of like the New York kind of no wave scene, which was being more experimental, pushing back against like MTV's commercialization of punk and new wave and the like. And the reason this album kind of doesn't work as a soundtrack in the same way is because it's really it was like a going away album almost, because they were collapsing in the 90s. Functionally, the band was like falling apart. So they just like painstakingly took everything that they could find sitting around. If you look at the liner notes for the album, it's basically like a mishmash of everything they could find and kind of piece back together into some sort of album.
Yeah.
It's like a swan song, so to speak.
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And then, they ended the group. It was sort of thought to be probably their last, like new music, basically. But yeah, I wasn't really familiar with them until 2012 when The Seer came out, which was part of their like that trifecta of albums, which is I forget the 2010 one. But it was that and To Be Kind. No, The Provider was a song. I'm trying to remember what the 2010 one, but it was like this trifecta of like amazing experimental like post-rock albums. One that's so good, I guess I can't remember. The Seer and To Be Kind. And To Be Kind was 2014, which is when this was put on Bandcamp. So I think it was putting some stuff up in response to their renewed popularity of Swans. And yeah, so I think that's really what I'm familiar with, and it's great. I mean, it's obviously stuff that I love and that we've talked about similar acts on the show before, but I don't know. I never really thought that they would get onto the show. I mean, we kind of, only because it feels a little different from like Godspeed, which we carved out a whole episode for.
I mean, there are similarities, of course, but like,
sure.
Yeah. This album did blow me away because it's so much to absorb, and they're reading up on it too. Like they had been building up all this vast library of recorded sounds and loops and other things, and they just threw it all in. It seems like they threw it all into this album, and God, it's a lot, but like it's fascinating and intense. But yeah, I think it's kind of like a musical stream of consciousness. There's not really like a through line in it, but it's all negative. It's all misery, stresses, agonies, despairs, bursts of energy, being pulled in 1,000 directions at once, which sounds like where the state of mind they were in as they were falling apart as a band.
And their music's always been on the pessimistic side.
Yeah.
That's also not surprising.
Yeah.
Just probably putting it lightly.
Yeah.
But it tends to be fairly not happy music. But man, it works.
It does work. So a couple things also to note about this is one of the main sources of there's a lot of vocal samples on this album, people just talking. Again, that meme of like guys only seeing the Boss Baby movie sees the second movie. Boy, I'm getting a real Boss Baby album movie vibes from this. And then so like for me, my main post-rock experience is Godspeed You Black Emperor. I'm like, boy, I'm getting
your Persona 5.
Yeah. Yeah, it's my Persona 5. Yeah. Getting real Godspeed You Black Emperor because they have it sounds like a crazy person just ranting into the song. But they have, looking up on the Wikipedia for this, they talk about how they had these tape narrations we've been collecting that they got from someone connected to the band's father was an FBI agent. And so the father had all these surveillance tapes left over, and the band got a hold of these surveillance tapes. And so they just start playing these clips of these people being surveilled by the FBI and throw them into their music. So I don't know if they were labeled or like if they ever found out who these people actually were. Probably not. I think like the first big vocal sample and like one of the first few tracks that the guy was aware the FBI was listening, was just making fun of them or ranting about it like a crazy person. So yeah, one of the later tracks, they have a phone sex operator talking about, track 6, The Beautiful Days, is probably a phone sex operator talking about her work. They alter her voice. And so, this is the kind of framework we're working with. Like, this is not going to make you feel great about life. But yeah, it's a real interesting album to just kind of get this. I was also kind of thinking about like James Joyce's Ulysses, that kind of stream of consciousness, like just the sheer chaos of each stream.
And a different genre every chapter.
Yeah, exactly.
This is my,
that's
my stream of consciousness. This one's a play. This one is written as a,
That's exactly it. But there's a lot of beauty in this track or in this album. There's a lot of just incredible pieces of music, and it's worth listening to.
Yeah. Also should highlight before we get into individual tracks I'm going to link the Bandcamp version in the show notes just out of ease, but you should look into this either on other services or buy the album on Bandcamp, because the Bandcamp like streaming page doesn't include the longer tracks. Like any of the tracks over 10 minutes are not included streamable just on the website. Like they're included in the zip if you buy it. And that's like some of the best stuff just because it is so long. It has so much time.
Oh, yeah.
To do what it wants. So like track 24, The Final Sacrifice, is like just big, long and consuming. Just like track 14 is just like big, noisy experimental rock. Like some of those are some of like the coolest tracks.
Oh, yeah.
Closest to Swans, what I think of from other albums. But I think in terms of this album, though, what I really liked was the stuff that's, I'm going to say a little different, because their albums always have tons of different experiments and exploration on them. But out of all this, like it's like 2.5 hours of music. And my favorite of it is about 4 minutes across 2 tracks, which is track 10, Surrogate 2, and track 26, Surrogate Drone. Just because they are just like not quite the drone from like a bagpipe, but close. And just that sort of like real, I don't know, air quotes, true drone, because it is literally called The Drone. It is always, that's something I really like. I do like all the tracks where there's like crazy monologues over them. So track 9 all lined up.
Oh, yeah.
track 6, Beautiful Days, you mentioned. I'm just sort of like scattershotting because there's so much.
Yeah.
And one thing I think is interesting is that because it's not nostalgia, it's not trying to be like 80s or, I think the like soundtracks to movies that don't exist is like a little tongue in cheek. I'm not totally sure. Not like in a bad way. I just don't know, but it's not like a coherent soundtrack. But the point being that some of it feels so contemporary to me. And I don't know if that's just because this genre maybe hasn't evolved as much as it should have in 30 years or some other effect. But I really thought, a lot of parts like the Beautiful Days and stuff sounded like as good as like contemporary experimental noise, despite being 96.
Yeah, they were really pushing the envelope in 1996. That's I mean, I'm not really focused on keeping up with like the new stuff in post rock and the related genres. So I don't know if anything has really pushed past. That's a real interesting point. I wonder.
Yeah, it kind of hit me on like track 13, which is like a short little Red Velvet Wound. The short little waltz, like a spooky waltz.
Oh,
like a woman singing, but
like a music box kind of sound, right?
Yeah. But it felt to me like if you clean it up a little bit, it just felt like a St. Vincent song to me for some reason.
I
just felt like I was like, oh, this is something like if you cleaned up slightly that I could see her doing. I think it's because I was like, listen, had Paris is Burning in my head for some reason.
Okay.
But like, like a knock against it just felt like ahead of its time in a lot of ways to me.
Well, they specifically list in the they quote this guy. This interview, and he says, let's see, frontman Michael Gira says in 97, I've been always interested in different sounds like that and listen to Brian Eno and different kinds of music that use non-musical sources often. And as I made this record, I had a lot of that material. And so, he was really they were consciously trying to push the envelope, to experiment and try something new. And that really carries forward. Of course, you mentioned track 13. I want to mention the next track, The Sound, which is one of the, like, we have to have a sample of that epic crescendo post rock.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So let's listen. Yeah, I love the idea. Like there's a lot of singing on this album. There's a lot of lyrics, which is unusual for us to review.
Sure.
But the singing is kind of like its own kind of drone instrument, just the way that they sing on this album. And it's majestic. Like it's very epic. And I love it. I love it. And like I did love, like you mentioned, like the previous track, or not the previous track, but before that, track 12, Animus.
You're naming all the long ones that aren't on. You got to buy the album to hear.
Yep, that's true. I love it.
Yeah.
But it goes like, it starts as this slow and sad and then really just transforms this post-rock anarchy. Like, it's great stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also really like the stuff that felt a little off genre or like felt modern for other reasons. So like track 5, Yum Yab Killers, is like rock in another room, basically. You know, it's very muffled. And like track 7, Volcano, is like a 90s club track.
Yes. You know what I put in? Like dark passion pit, maybe? Like it is EDM-ish. Like,
well, well, it sounded to me, I was thinking of the 90s, and I was thinking it sounded like, if you want to go with the soundtracks for movies vibe, like some teen drama, like Kids or something, and they're all going to the club when they're not supposed to.
Taking ecstasy for the first time.
Taking ecstasy at the club or something. Kids is maybe not the right reference. But I was thinking of like there's that whole run of, I don't know, I just call them EDM movies. Like we watched Go one movie night.
Just thinking,
like that type of like very, very kinetic.
Train Spotting, but lighter.
90s. Yeah. Yeah. Less heroin.
Yeah.
Well, actually, no, Go did have a bunch of heroin, but less heroin overdoses and swimming in toilets to get it, I guess.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean?
Yeah. More about the exuberance of being a club kid in the 90s.
Yeah, like the examination and consequences of that life. That feels like a track from that type of movie.
Yeah. No, I love that one. You know, there was a time in my life where I did listen to a lot of Passion Pit, and this like reminded me of that. And yeah, but then we get like very like languid kind of like, and they just have like rock, like they just have like kind of more, not I wouldn't say standard, but like it's, you know, just rock, and then like sad, like languid kind of like slow rock.
Yeah.
And then we get into drone and industrial. Like it's just everything. They got everything in here.
Yeah, it's hard to like really focus and talk because you'll probably find something you like, but you may have to go through a lot of stuff you don't to get there, depending on your taste.
There was track one that did annoy me that I would not re-listen to. I would skip it. That was track 15. Her mouth is filled with honey, because those high frequency bells, man, that was oof.
A little anxiety inducing. Yeah.
A little like, this, I don't want to listen. This is not a good dissonance. This is a bad dissonance. Yeah.
It's a weird little batch because you have that, which is, very, very weird. It almost sounds like it'd be like a Lynch montage or something. And then like track 16 Blood Section is like pretty straightforward rock, like pretty good as far as the album goes, like pretty just straightforward, rock. And then 18 I really liked, Minus Something, which is just like back to ominous drone.
Yeah, and I think more FBI tapes in that one too. It's weird. But good. So yeah, this is really like, if there's one album you buy on Bandcamp this year, make it this one from 1996, because you get like 3 albums for one. Yeah. Not just in length, but in thematics. Yeah.
If you're like me and you're only really familiar with Swans from their releases, the last 10, 15 years, then I think it's a good way to revisit kind of what they were doing at the time and sort of appreciate it.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. We had a lot of fun making it. Our next episode, we are going to be looking through the Night Clerk Radio Discord server to find the best albums that our patrons have been like listening to and linking. And so we'll be doing, it's Discord scraping season. Always scrape your Discord servers.
Twice a year. That's right. You got to clean your Discords twice a year.
So these will not be in-depth reviews, but a lot of little like, oh, maybe you like this. Maybe you like this. So yeah, and speaking of that, if you want to get ahead of that scraping, you can join our Discord server by becoming a patron. Patreon.com/nightclerkradio. For only $5 a month, you can join our Discord, get a bonus episode every month. We've built up quite a backlog of episodes if you want to binge. And we have a very nice Discord where we talk about things like movies and art and all of that stuff.
Yeah. This is going to be a rough scraping, actually, thinking about it, because I feel like people have been posting a lot of stuff that I haven't got a chance to listen to yet. Like I usually kind of keep up with it, but yeah, I've really been busy the last few months and fallen off responding to the Discord as much. So sorry, folks.
It'll be intense.
But there's going to be a lot of scrolling. But yeah, and if you like this podcast, please rate and review us on your podcasting app of choice. We are on Blue Sky. We're on all the social medias. We got a website, nightclerkradio.com. But tell your friends, tell your frenemies. Tell your rival whom you hate, but you cannot bear to leave them alone, and you stare longingly into their eyes as you fight with swords in the moonlight. I just started a podcast with mine.
Oh no! Yeah, do that. Tell them about Night Clerk and how much you like it. And yeah, we'll be seeing you in the moonlight, perhaps. We'll talk to you. Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.